We're also conducting studies in autism, and we started this program with a phase 1 safety and endpoint defining study with plans to go to phase 2. So the phase 1 study, which was an open label study for 25 patients, completed enrollment almost a year ago now, and children were followed up at 6 and 12 months, and we're just finishing the 12-month cohort, but I can show you a little bit about the 6-month cohort. And we had to assess tolerability and safety, look at these various endpoints that were available to us, both parent-reported and observation-directed, to figure out what we could use to run a phase 2 study that we had confidence in being able to answer a question. We also are looking to define the length of the trials. The way this study was designed, children were enrolled after a full assessment by neuropsychologists, some neurophysiologic testing, MRI, and a qualification of their cord blood unit. And then they were seen again at 6 months for a second assessment, 12 months for a third assessment, and we'll take it forward from there. 25 children were enrolled and infused. There were no safety events reported. 3 kids had mild allergic reactions, coughs and hives in 1 kid and a cough in 2 children. These were mild and did not interfere with the completion of the infusion, and there were no longer term effects. So we concluded that this was safe and tolerable, but I will tell you, because we're working with all different populations of kids, that for the autistic kids, in order to not freak them out about being in a hospital and getting an IV and going through this procedure, we actually worked out a system where they were sedated for their MRI by an anesthesiologist, and then that's when their IV was put in. We sedated them again at the end of the MRI, essentially gave them another dose of medicine while they were still asleep so that we could get the infusion in while they were still asleep. And then we typically had to take out their IV as soon as they woke up because they weren't interested in maintaining that kind of intervention. But we worked out the ways to work with these kids. Now, this is some preliminary data from the 6-month evaluations, but basically we saw that between 60 to 70% of these children improved after this therapy at 6 months, and their symptoms of autism improved. And these are just some of the different measures that were used, but sensory, social, I can't see, but repetitive behavioral and withdrawal all improved. Now, these are not, this was not a controlled study. There's no placebo here. Everyone was treated. It's open label. But in the cohort, we saw these improvements. We saw improvements in gaining of language. This was measured by something called the Lena, which is a voice recorder that children can wear over 12 hours, and their utterances are scored through a computer analysis. There was improvement at 6 months. We looked at brain connectivity through fiber tracking on MRI with DTI. This is just what the normal connectome looks like. This is work by Alan Song in our group, but basically these are nodes that have pathways that are established and defined from newborn to 82-year-olds. And we looked at the relative absence or increase in those pathways in these autistic children. And basically we're able to show that in the children who improved, this doesn't predict very well, but there was a significant increase in connectivity over the 6-month period. This is preliminary and has to be investigated further, but these are encouraging biomarkers for us to have more confidence in the results we see. And I'm just going to show you a couple of videos to illustrate the point. So this is a child at baseline. You're looking at him from 2 angles, okay? So he has a lot of the typical symptoms of an autistic child, repetitive behaviors. Not interacting with his dad, not really engaging in play.
Anybody think there's a car in the garage?
So you see he won't. Okay, and then here's this child 6 months later. And of course you could say to me, well, he's different day, different time, he feels better, he's, you know, but this is what it is. So you have to believe me that in the context of all this other testing, this is the typical kind of improvement we saw in these kids. And they're not just rated on one video, but every child is videoed in the context of testing. And they're all at our center for a week, so they get acclimated to the testing team. And the testing team has no idea what happened during the cell infusion. So our next study we're planning to start this winter is a standard randomized phase 2 blinded but crossover design study where children and their cord blood unit will be available. They will get randomized to placebo or best donor, and I'll come back to that in a minute. And then we think in 6 months they'll come back and cross over and get whatever product they didn't get the first time. And for best donor, if they have an available autologous unit, they will get it. If not, they will get an allogeneic unit, which will be either sibling or unrelated based on cell dose and what's available in their setup. There are a lot of nuances to this, but we hope to be able to answer 2 questions. One, is placebo, or are cells better than placebo? And 2, is there a difference between autologous and allogeneic therapy? And since the etiology of autism is complex, and some may be genetic and some may not, you know, we think the auto-allo question is important.